Welcome to the weekly update of Israel and Christians today. It's the 31st of October 2024. Israel is right to call for the dismantling of UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency for the Palestinians. There has been much discussion over the past year about the role played in Gaza by UNRWA. This past week, things came to a head when the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, adopted two laws cutting Israel's cooperation with UNRWA. There has been an international outcry. The UN Secretary General Guterres claims that Israel's legislation will lead to a humanitarian disaster as the Palestinians in Gaza are entirely dependent on UNRWA for their survival and there is no alternative for UNRWA. But is that true? There is no doubt that UNRWA plays a critical role in the distribution of humanitarian aid to the Arab-Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. There's also no doubt that Palestinians in Gaza are suffering tremendously in this war. Also true that UNRWA, which has 13,000 employees in the Gaza Strip alone, helps distribute massive amounts of aid provided by international organizations. However, it is simply not true that UNRWA is indispensable, either in the short or the medium or the longer term. As various commentators have shown, including the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council, in its analysis published this week, there's no reason why UNRWA cannot be replaced. As Ajax says, there are many aid agencies operating in Gaza. Many of these are other UN agencies, including the UN's own World Food Programme. The UN Central Emergency Relief Fund asserts that it has, since its creation, provided more than $6 billion in life-saving assistance in more than 100 countries and territories. So the idea that only UNRWA can do this in Gaza, what the other UN agencies do elsewhere, is farcical. Now, concerning the immediate future, Israel is committed to ensuring that humanitarian aid reaches the population in Gaza within the constraints, obviously, of Israel's legitimate war against Hamas. Let's not forget that Hamas is still holding 100 hostages in the tunnels of the Gaza Strip and is refusing to release them. Now, following the passage of the legislation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement pledging, quote, "Since avoiding a humanitarian crisis is also essential, sustained humanitarian aid must remain available in Gaza now and in the future." In the 90 days before this legislation takes effect and after, we stand ready to work with our international partners to ensure Israel continues to facilitate humanitarian aid to civilians in Gaza in a way that does not threaten Israeli security, end quote. Now, the more fundamental issue, however, is that UNRWA is a deeply and institutionally flawed organization and must be replaced. UNRWA exists to perpetuate the myth that all Palestinians have a right of return. It keeps the Palestinians in an eternal state of victimhood and perpetuates their failure to take responsibility for the lack of a Palestinian state. The right of return, as it is often called, is a myth because most Palestinians are not refugees at all. They are descendants of refugees from the 1948 war, and no refugees have a right of return. There's no other refugees, by the way, in the world who are perpetuated from generation to generation as refugees. As Dr. Arnott Wilf and many others have demonstrated, keeping this system alive is perpetuating rather than contributing to the solution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But the immediate reason Israel has adopted this legislation is because UNRWA's role in Gaza since the 7th of October shows that there are fundamental and systemic problems with UNRWA's connections with terror. Its relationship with terror as an organization is a problem that directly and immediately threatens Israel's security and the lives of Israeli citizens, both Jewish and non-Jewish. As AJAC has reported, there is considerable, incontrovertible evidence of seemingly uncontested Hamas abuse of UNRWA facilities over the last 12 months of war, end quote. And the organization UN Watch in Geneva has been warning for months, if not longer, that UNRWA is deeply connected with Hamas and must be dismantled. For example, numerous UNRWA staff took part in the October 7th massacre. Hundreds of UNRWA staff in Gaza are members of terrorist groups. The head of UNRWA's teachers' union in Lebanon was Hamas terror chief in Lebanon. And the head of UNRWA's teachers' union in Gaza is on the Hamas Politburo with Yahya Sinwar, who was recently eliminated. 3,000 UNRWA teachers were in a Telegram group that celebrated October the 7th, and Hamas has built a terror tunnel directly below UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, hiding a computer intelligence center that was powered by the agency's electrical grid. The United Nations has ignored all of this and Israel's concerns for too long. The Secretary General in particular has buried his head in the sand. Israel is fully entitled to protect itself and moreover has shown it will be taking all possible efforts in the coming days and months to ensure that Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip receive adequate humanitarian assistance. The outcry that is currently directed against Israel should be directed at the organization that established and is responsible for UNRWA, the United Nations. And that means our nations need to take responsibility for UNRWA's failures. That's the end of today's weekly update. We wish you a wonderful weekend and look forward to being back with you next week. Thank you so much.